Can everybody kind of move this way? And this is the very first time that I have ever been bossed around by the head football coach's wife, who walked up to me just now and said, "Would you kind of get on with it?" Yes, ma'am, Ms. Trisciani. Anything you say, madam. Golly. Gary, you up there, bro? Hey, Judge, you going up? Yeah. Is everybody up there? Oh, yeah. Y'all want some disinfectant? So let's see. Where's looking for Tony? Where's Tony? Anyway, I'll talk to him then. Hey, welcome everybody. We're online? Okay. We'll know after a while exactly how many people are kind of checking in on us. But my name is Bob Disher. I'm one of the pastors here at St. Mark's Church, and we're glad you're here. And I'll talk just a few minutes about what brings this group together. It's been an interesting kind of week. Let me say a couple of introductory things, and then I'll have the panel to introduce themselves, and then we'll start rolling. It was March the 11th of this year, which in some ways seems like 2 years ago, but it was March the 11th. And that was the first day that we started hearing the word pandemic. 2 days later, the president said we are now in a national emergency. That was the 13th. 2 days later, on the 15th, we couldn't go to church, or we couldn't come to the building. We were shut down, and you all know the rest of that story. Everything went into shutdown, and it was really kind of crazy. Quarantine, physical distancing, and nobody could find toilet paper. It's absolutely amazing, isn't it? I'm not sure I still haven't figured out what the toilet paper, Doug, you know anything about the toilet paper? I mean, I don't get it, but we couldn't, it was hard to get toilet paper. Did anybody in here besides me feel like after a while that you were in the spin cycle in the washing machine? Like, you know, your whole world was spinning around and you didn't know what was coming. Well, 10 days later, actually, not 10 days later, but on May 25th, our country was thrown into another pandemic. There was a 9-minute intersection. And gentlemen, how are you? Good. Great seeing y'all. I watched that video 2 times. It's been on TV 2,000 times, but I can't do it again. I mean, 2 times was enough for me. 1 or 2 days after that whole thing started to break, somebody said to me, "It's a complicated thing." And I thought, I didn't see anything complicated. There's nothing complicated to me in that video. That had to break the heart of God. And around this church, we like to say, if something breaks the heart of God, then it breaks ours. It gets our attention. So over the past couple of weeks, only 10 days, you know, I've heard a lot about, you know, are we going to take a stand? Are you taking a stand? Are they taking a stand? And when are we going to take a stand? And I got to tell you, I wanted to take a seat. I needed to talk to somebody. So I called my friend. He's one of my best friends in the whole world. Raise your hand, Pastor. That's Gary Williams. He'll tell you about himself in a minute. I've known him for 30 years, officiated at his wedding about 50 feet from here in the sanctuary. Where's Josh? There's Josh. There's his son that I'm partly responsible for. I just keep saying that to you because you're a lot better looking than your dad, and I know that you take after your mother. And I remember she is a total knockout. So you got lucky on that one, son. But I called my friend Gary Williams and I said, "Can we talk? I need to sit down with somebody, and we need to talk." And you jumped right on it, and you said, "I'm on the way I'll be there." And you came over. And then this past Sunday, I don't think I'm supposed to say this, but after church, every now and then some people sneak in. Coach Trisciani, who was our head football coach at Elon, he said to me, "You know, Bob, some of the players are back on the campus, and some of them aren't doing well. Can we help them in any way?" So I talked to Gary, and we had some conversation. We had some conversation with Cliff Parker, who you'll meet Cliff in a minute. He's an elder here, and also he's a member. He's been in law enforcement his entire career. And then I communicated with Judge Brown. He's one of our local judges. You'll meet him in just a moment. And so we said, why don't we do something? You know, you and I were saying a little bit ago, Doug, that we said we don't know if anything will come of this, but there's got to be a starting point at some time somewhere. And so here we are, sitting. We're not standing, but we're sitting to talk, so we can talk to each other, right, Coach? I mean, that's what we wanted to do, just talk to each other. Gary, I said to you in my office the other day, silence is indifference. And you've known me for over 3 decades, and you know that there's just not much indifferent about me. And I'm telling you something, Judge, just the thought of the hypocrisy of indifference is ripping my soul. So I'm just not willing to go there anymore, if I can help it. How many more George Floyds are there? I don't know. But I can't be okay until we sit down and talk, and that's kind of where we are. Coach, would you come up here and say, because I think you want to say a word about kind of what was happening inside of you this just 4 days ago on Sunday, and you and I had a conversation.
Yeah, sure. So this all started in a conversation on Sunday at church, and I get asked a lot of questions. Most recently, it's been, when are we going to play football? And when are we going to play football? But Sunday was more of how are your kids? And I'm one who, I'm guilty as charged. I'm a little naive. I've been living in this bubble at Elon, and I go to the field house and I go home, and so I don't know what it's like to grow up scared. A white man or a black man, but a grown man. And so we wanted to do something, and I really appreciate Bob and St. Mark's Church and Cliff for helping put this panel together and making this possible, and all of you for joining us today. And I really want to get to you and hear from you and our kids, but we felt like we needed to act, and we felt like we needed to act here and in our community, and we felt like we had to act now. So I appreciate you all coming and being a part of this with us today, and really look forward to hearing from you and hearing from some of our kids.
Okay. Would you all take a moment and introduce yourselves and tell a little bit about who you are and why it's important for you to be here, and then we'll open this up for some dialogue. How about that? So let's start over here, Randy. Okay.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for having me here, Pastor Bob, and for Coach Trish for putting this together and working with other colleagues at the university. My name is Randy Williams. I am the Associate Vice President for Inclusive Excellence and Civic Engagement and Assistant Professor of Education at Elon University. And I've been doing diversity work ever since March 24th, 1974, so the day I entered this world. By my presence, by the work that I've gained through the experiences, through some education, both formal and informal. And I am a father, I am a husband, so this is personal work for me, thinking about the society that we're in. And I was speaking with Charlotte earlier tonight, and there are many times when I'm referred to as Real Talk Randy. And in that sense, my comments, I'll just go ahead and preface that I speak from a racial equity lens. I feel that I have a pretty solid and still growing racial analysis. I look at this world through a racial lens where I see the outcomes of people as a stratification based on race, regardless of any category, and that's statistically and categorically true. My undergraduate degree is in physics, so I tend to look at a lot of data. And so when you see something that is so ubiquitous across all institutions of society, whether you're looking at third grade reading levels, whether you're looking at police stops, whether you're looking at home ownership, whether you're looking at mortality rates amongst pregnant women, there's a stratification of outcomes. And within that stratification, those who have the most favorable outcomes are white, and those who have the worst outcomes tend to be black or indigenous people, oftentimes mostly black. So that's the lens through which I look at society, because it's that statistically proven across data sets, and I honor that, I respect that. And so I am very passionate about this, knowing this data, and then also having had experiences as well. So this is very personal to me. Again, as a father, I have to have those tough conversations with my two daughters as they leave the threshold of our home each day into the world, and making sure that they're prepared to deal with the injustices that are inevitable to them in their experiences. So that's why it's important for me.
Hello, everyone. Is this on? Charlotte Smith. I'm the head women's basketball coach at Elon University. I've been at Elon for 10 years, and this is important to me because I feel like this is a time in our nation where we need strong leaders. And I feel like I'm a leader, and I have to be an example for young women, and my responsibility is to empower them to be strong leaders, to go out and make a difference in the world. And I'm here because of my experiences. I want to share my experiences. I think the greatest thing is that you cannot conquer what you don't confront. And I think a lot of times we want to put our heads in the sand and pretend that it doesn't exist or hope that it goes away. But racism in America is real. I've experienced it, so I'm here to share my experience and hope to educate and help the world be in a better place.
Good evening, everyone. To Pastor Bob, thank you for being a leader here in Alamance County. Thank you for being a pastor that's just not about a bunch of lip service. You're a man of action, and you've been that way since the first day I've met you. So I thank you, sir, for allowing all of us to be here, to Coach for having his vision to be here, and to all the young people, young men and women who are here today, but you could have been anywhere else, but you thought it not robbery to be here just to talk. And I believe that's what we have to do, is have a honest dialogue. Why am I here, Pastor? Because racism is real. As Coach has already stated, Coach Charlotte has said, for us to keep our heads in the sand is a problem for me. I believe that God blesses individuals with leadership, and God blesses those people that have certain positions of leadership. And I strongly believe that those who are blessed to have these leadership roles, if you remain silent, to me, you're part of the problem, because you're doing nothing but waiting for things to change instead of creating that change. I'm here, Pastor, because I refuse to shut up. I'm here because I refuse to be silent. And for those leaders who choose to be silent, you will be held responsible as well. I'm thankful for being here with such esteemed individuals on this panel. And I hope, young people, I want to hear from you tonight. I want to hear how you're feeling. I want to hear if you're hurt, because I'm hurt. I want to hear if you're angry, because I'm angry. I want to hear if you're frustrated. I'm frustrated. But I'm telling you, young people, violence, hatred doesn't have to beget hatred. Violence doesn't have to be, it shouldn't be answered with more violence. Because the Bible teaches me, Pastor Williams, you tell me if I'm wrong, that the greatest of these things is love. This man here, I love him. Pastor Bob, my good friend Chief Parker, Pastor Williams, Coach Charlotte, my good friend Brother Williams. I love them and I don't care what color they are. Because if God doesn't see color, why should we? That's why I'm here.
My name is Gary Williams. Can y'all hear me? My name is Gary Williams. I am a retired North Carolina Highway Patrol. I served 30 years as the first African American trooper in Alamance County. So I understand quite vividly what we're facing today. I'm a father of two. I am a pastor at a country church in Caswell County called Sassafras Grove. And I've been friends with this wonderful man named Pastor Bob Disher for going on 40 years. Why am I here? Because what I saw some days ago brought tears to my eyes. And I wept because as a law enforcement officer and one who in those 30 years never had an excessive use of force complaint, but faced racism as I wore that badge. But the day that I retired from the North Carolina Highway Patrol, I cried because I felt that that was the end of the opportunity to help someone. I understood what it meant to put that badge on, and I took those terms of protect and serve to heart. Because I felt like, and I still feel like, that is the role of law enforcement officers. We're there to protect, and we're there to serve, and we're not there to merit out judgment. We leave that to Judge Brown and those judicial officials. So I'm here to get understanding and have each and every one of us fulfill a role, because when we can get understanding, we can solve any problem that exists. Thank y'all for having me, Pastor Bob. Thank these panelists, and I thank you young people for coming out. What I saw in the role of these protests was not like the turbulent times of the 60s, because it took on a different culture. As our former president said, there were many different faces, unlike those in Selma, Alabama, in Montgomery, and in Memphis. There was a rainbow that I saw. And we're going to let that rainbow shine, because when the rainbow comes out, the rain is gone, and the sun is going to shine again. Thank y'all for having me.
My name is Cliff Parker. First, let me just say, the coach gave me something I can display in my office. I have a great love for Elon and this community. I was born and raised a couple hours away in Fayetteville, and came here in the 70s and had the privilege of being a student athlete at Elon. I made that sound pretty good. It was more athlete student, but and met my wife, who's here tonight at Elon, and we have 3 daughters, 5 grandkids, actually 6, one on the way. We live in this community. This has become our home. I felt a calling when I was at Elon to serve in the community and in this state and answered the call to law enforcement and joined the Burlington Police Department. After a few years there, went to work for the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation and worked all over the state and had a chance to come back and live in this community and work here. Then I had the privilege of being selected the town of Elon police chief, where I served for 6.5 years. And now, for the last 2 years, I've been at, or going on 2 years, at the Alamance County Sheriff's Office. And I know the folks at this table, some better than others. Reverend Gary and I served in law enforcement for 30 years together. We both knew Pastor Bob back in the day and rubbing elbows up at the YMCA, and that was a rainbow too, wasn't it, brother? We law enforcement, people from all over the community, folks on probation, or whatever it was, we gathered there and played ball together and spent time together. And Judge Brown swore me in at the sheriff's office. I have a great love for him, his heart for this community, his heart for us and to see change. And then I have great respect for Coach and for Dr. Williams down there. For it's while it's been bittersweet, I've looked down a panel at you before, brother, because this isn't the first time we've done this, and I so we've shared this, and I would just say when Pastor Bob talked to me about it, there's an ache in his heart, and there's an ache in my heart, and I would just say, I'm sorry.
Thanks to all of you. Let me tell you the game plan. And there's a microphone here in the center of the room. We would especially love to hear from our college folks who are here, our student athletes, if you're willing to do that. We also, Coach, you sent this program is now being broadcast on YouTube to all the student athletes who are part of the university right now, and so those of you who are watching us on the webcast, you can, what's it called, Gordon? They just okay, just go on chat, and you can't speak to us on YouTube, but you can chat, you can type in your questions, and our guys will get those questions up front here. So with that, the mic is open. You may want to just kind of ponder for a moment, and if you're quiet, the judge will talk. So, I've never known Judge Brown that.
I love you, Pastor.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So, anyone, just kind of make your way here, and certainly we're glad to have. There are a number of coaches here. I know the football staff, but. So what shall we do? Anybody? And I'm just over here on the side, and you can just ask the question if you want to. And these gentlemen and lady, they have various backgrounds and levels of experience, or you can direct a question to one of these folks because they come from many different platforms, but they all have a platform, as you do. So let's go for it. Let me do this one, and then this one is directed to you, Randy, and or it says to whomever else might want to jump in. How can white Elon students be an effective ally, and what does allyship mean right now?
That's a good question, and one that I'm hearing frequently, particularly over this last week. What can I do? How can I become a better ally? I think the first thing is just start with self. Really becoming much more aware of self, being conscious of the way that you traverse the spaces in which you're in. I think being knowledgeable of who's speaking in spaces in which you're in. And I think also doing some private things such as research and educating oneself about the development of this construct called race, and see how it has its origins and its manifestations throughout time. I think some of those private moments such as those would be really enlightening for white students, for white adults to learn more about the origins of race, how it's developed, and understanding that it was not a tool or something developed to actually start and oppress people, but it was actually developed to advantage white people. So it's never intended to oppress anybody, but in the process of advantaging any one thing, in effect, you're going to oppress something else or someone else. And in this case, whites have been advantaged, and then the flip side of that is oppression. So understanding from that orientation, that paradigm, that little piece right there, understanding that perspective and seeing how that has manifested over time is really important, and seeing, wow, I understand now how my black classmate or my teammate may feel in this particular situation. It's going to take years of development. I myself am still learning as well. I constantly read, but in order to be an ally, you have to understand what the issue is. How did it start? How has it grown and developed? How has it, racism is probably one of the most insidious things that exists. It has traversed through 400 years, and it reinvents itself through decades, through centuries, and it's just been one of those very wicked issues that we have grappled with in our society. And so I think the core of what I would want these allies, potential allies, to do is to check oneself, some self-evaluation, be much more conscious of spaces, and then educate oneself. And then that will expand, and once you learn, you're going to be hungry to learn more, and then you have a greater understanding for interacting with your black friends, your black faculty, your black anybody in the community, your black community members, or any other race as well. So that's what I would advise for those who are seeking to become an ally.
Good, thank you for that. And
I
just want to say this to you, Randy. And I'm wanting to understand, right, Gary? I mean, when you and I sat the other day, I just, I so desperately want to understand, and so whatever it takes is what I want to do. Okay, Sean.
I was going to say, don't be afraid to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's what needs to be done. I had a friend of mine who's a white friend. When all of this happened, she called me and she said, can you spend some time with me helping me to understand the black experience? I said, sure. I invited her over to my house. We social distance. We walked in my neighborhood for probably about an hour and a half, just talking about the black experience and just opening her mind and enlightening her to different things that she didn't understand and didn't know. So get comfortable with being uncomfortable and ask questions to a black friend.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you were saying to me, Gary, because a couple times I would hesitate and you would say, come on, brother, you got to lay it out there. So, Judge Brand, how about you and me going in for a 90-minute walk?
Let's go.
Yeah, that just sounds like you. I mean, we'd have a blast, wouldn't we?
We
Coach,
have to social distance.
Of course we would, yeah. Coach, you have a question?
I've got questions from the chat. So
Just,
bring questions from the chat whenever
oh, this is the chat or this is here?
from the chat.
Okay. Go ahead, ask one. Step up.
Okay. So mainly directed to Cliff Parker, what are the steps that you personally would take if there was an officer in your department who does not understand or agree with the Black Lives Matter protests?
So what are the steps if we didn't agree?
Cliff,
Oh,
so you can just see it yourself. So, sorry about that.
what are the steps that you personally would take if there was an officer in your department who does not understand or agree with the Black Lives Matter protest? So this is we're in a unique time now because, as Gary said, we are tasked with protecting and serving. So each time any activity takes place, many of you may already be aware that this past Sunday there was a large gathering. Doug, I believe you were there. Judge Brown spoke in Burlington at Mako Bigelow North Park, and we had other groups, because what will happen sometimes is whenever groups want to participate in First Amendment speech and express themselves, and the community wants to come together, you will often have other groups that want to interfere and just cause problems in other parts of the community. So we were actually out trying to protect the community and being aware and being all over. So we spend our time working that way. In addition to that, I've spent a great part of today meeting with community leaders about events that's coming up this week, this coming weekend and next week, where folks want to come together and be together and express themselves and pray and interact in our community. So for as far as the specifics of the group of Black Lives Matter or any other specific protest, I haven't had any direct contact within our agency of any, I don't know if this is answering the question, we haven't had issues in which individuals have personally opposed groups that I'm aware of. So what we do is we simply, and it may sound very impersonal, but it's part of the role we play in law enforcement, is we want to protect folks' right to gather and express themselves and protect them from outside issues and protect the community and those things. So it's kind of a function of the job we do. It's probably, I don't know if I'm getting at the heart of the question here. Gary, you spent 30 years in the profession.
Well, I think you explained to them, those individuals who are asking and have an issue with this Black Lives Matter movement, you have to say to them the reason it is important because of the bias, and the bias that has been so prevalent throughout the years, how it's been so unequal. Pastor Bob Disher and myself, as we were talking in his study, he asked the question, help me understand. Help me understand, why is it that there is a concern with individuals in policing? And I was very candid with Pastor when I said to him, let me give you an example, Pastor. If you're driving down the road in your car and you're in compliance, your license, your registration, and everything is up to date, you're not speeding, you aren't intoxicated by any impairing substance, you look in your rearview mirror and you see a blue light, your question to you and yourself is, I wonder why he's stopping me for. But if it's me, or Judge Brown, or Dr. Williams, or Denzel Washington, Samuel L. Jackson, Clarence Thomas of the Supreme Court, or even former President Barack Obama, if he's stopped in those same conditions, the thought he's having is, I wonder if this stop is going to go bad. And that's the truth, because that's every black male's fear of how former individuals have been stopped and not been given due process. When they were even in compliance, when hands were raised and the stop didn't go as it should have gone. So that's the reason for the movement, because we should have and receive the same justice, the same level of enforcement without that bias. And if an individual in that department can't understand, then he needs to be in a meeting just like this so he can get some understanding.
I would say, just in terms of Black Lives Matter, it is really frustrating when we say Black Lives Matter and then people say, well, all lives matter. And it's not that we're saying that all lives don't matter. We're saying that Black lives matter too. And so the example would be if there are a row of houses and there's a fire truck coming and there's one house that's on fire, the other houses shouldn't be complaining that the fire truck is not stopping at their house. Your house is not on fire. That's the whole point of Black Lives Matter. It's not that all lives don't matter, but Black lives matter too.
Gary, that's what you were saying to me the other day, that there's a difference between you and me in regards to one of us is going to be most likely, if there's going to be a fire, it's probably not going to happen to me. Yeah, and that was numbing to me. Go ahead, Randy.
Thank you. I just want us to also consider, too, this question seems to get at the idea of the bad apples amongst police officers. And some of you may have heard the other day where the National Security Advisor stated that there is no systemic racism in law enforcement, that there are just a few bad apples. Well, I'm here to tell you, statistically and from a data perspective, that has been proven false. That is just not the case there. When you look at police stops amongst different locales and municipalities, you can see consistently that Black and brown people are pulled over at a higher rate than white people. So that is beyond just a few bad apple perspective there. So I just want us to think, and I say this, and I want you to hear me on this part too. I don't blame the police officers, the white police officers, because if we blame the white police officers, we are looking at it an individual person, one-off type of situation, and when we do that, we lose sight of the systemic nature of the issue. We have to look at that this is a systemic issue here rather than just a one-off bad apples. A few years ago, a Black man was shot by, he was a counselor helping a Black man in distress. A police officer showed up on the scene and he shot the counselor. And the counselor said, "Hey, why did you shoot me?" He's like, the police officer responded, "I don't know." Because systemically, it is ingrained in that way. I took upon myself to work with a police officer, assistant chief of police, and we had an extended period of meeting, lunches, discussions, and so forth, building trust. And during that time, he shared with me that his level of aggression increases when he enters Black neighborhoods. Just the fact alone of him entering the Black neighborhood, that his level of aggression increases. Now, I don't blame him. Once again, I don't blame him. He has been conditioned through the systems to have that level of aggression to raise. And it's not, again, a bad apple situation. It's a systemic one. So I just want us to think about the systemic nature as we think about how we interact with one another.
Great comments. Judge, yes. Well, you're raising your hand, and I'm going to put a question on top of your hand, and because we hear a lot about justice, and that word is, well, you spend your whole day on a bench in a courtroom, and if this is going to be one of these stumbling questions, Gary. So, your responsibility is to somehow administer what is justice. You'll correct me if I'm wrong. So would you talk a little bit about your thoughts about justice and how justice can get, what is my question? How it gets out of balance. It's not as cut and dry as some of us may think it is. Yes?
It's not,
Yeah.
but it is. My job as a judge, and a lot of you may misunderstand, we're in this technological stage of our lives and our world where someone can say one thing and then all of a sudden you say it in love and it turns out that somebody tries to flip it and make it like it's something bad. But let me tell you, as a judge, it's not my job. I don't have the authority to judge man. That's what God is here to do. And I'm not God. I judge a man or a woman's actions. I seek justice in everything that I do every day. I don't sit there and look at a man or a woman before me and wonder, are they a Democrat or a Republican? I don't sit there and wonder, do they hate black people or do they hate white people? I listen to the facts that are being presented before me, and I render a decision that's fair, that's consistent, that's with compassion, no matter who you are. I don't care if you're a defendant. Guess what? People make mistakes. You hold people responsible for their actions, but you treat them, I don't care what the person has allegedly done, you treat them with respect. That's the issue I have with Mr. Floyd losing his life being taken, because I asked myself the question, at what point in those 5 minutes, while his knee was in his neck, and this human being was gasping for life, did the officer even consider that he was a person? That he's a human? Whether something was done wrong or not, the question that I have is, how do you go from a $20 bill to death? How do we go from a registration plate violation and a stop for a registration violation to death? Why do you fear me? Because I wear a black hoodie in my neighborhood and it turns to death. I sit back often and I love my mom and my dad because they love me enough to tell me that all people are created equally. And I would watch time after time African American men walking with a sign, Brother Randy, that said, "I am a man." And I asked the question when I was 8 years, 9 years, 10 years old to my mother. I said, "Mom, why does a grown man have to walk around with a sign on his neck that says, 'I am a man'?" She said to me, "Because, Junior, other men don't consider him to be a man." And it concerns me that he would have to walk with a sign that said, "I am a man." What do you mean that we're in 2020? We're in 2020. What do you mean we're in 2020 asking for equality for all people? What do you mean we're in 2020 and women are still asking for equal pay? What do you mean in 2020 that we have to sit on a panel because another human has lost his life tragically? But if he had just thought that this is a man. So I work every day to seek justice in every case. People might think that I'm crazy. I don't even, read the newspaper the day before. You want to know why? Because I want to walk into court and hear the case fresh, with no preconceived ideas, no preconceived notions, because that man or that woman before me deserves an honest, a fair, a compassionate, an intelligent, a listening judge. But my question to each one of you is, what does justice mean to you? What does it mean to you? I would challenge each of you, whether you're white or black, it's time for us to be honest. It's time to be honest.
Judge, I think I know the answer to this, but so far in your career, every single person who has appeared before you has been made in the image of God. Am I right?
Amen. Not in my image, not in yours, but in the image of God. And if he does not see color, why should we? If you cut my arm, I'm going to bleed red. I was telling Coach, I was sitting there Monday evening with two little girls, 9 years old. Their parents were there. We were at a group discussion, and a 9-year-old African-American little girl said to me, Mr. Judge, I don't want to be a police officer anymore because they kill people. No. And guess what? A white little girl who was standing next to her said, 10 years old, she said, well, Mr. Judge, I don't want to be a police officer either because I don't want to treat black people bad. They're 9 and 10 years old. And what scares me, and I got on my knee, Pastor, I got on my knee and I held them and I said, police officers are good people. They're great people who are there to serve and to help us, protect us. There's some people that sometimes make really bad things happen. Sometimes. I said, but do you want to know why you should be a police officer? And they both said, why? With their eyes so beautiful. They both looked at me and said, why? I said, because you can become a police officer and you can treat everybody kindly and nicely. And both of those, black girl and a white girl said, and I said, who wants to be a police officer now? And both of them raised their hands. Because racism, I'm telling you, is taught. Love is taught too. Love is taught too. And if we learn how to love one another, I may not agree with every decision that Chief Parker makes. I love him anyhow. He doesn't agree with every decision that I make. He loves me anyhow. But we have to start being honest.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Coach Smith, or any coach in the room, directed to you, and this is I happen to know this guy. He's a defensive lineman, so it's not like a girl basketball player or something. He wants to know, what are your thoughts on athletes, even your athletes, using their platforms to speak on the injustices going on in America? So I guess what he's asking is, how does a 20-year-old, I'm just using that number, how does a 20-year-old college student figure out where their platform is, and how could they, if they felt the need to speak out, how would they go about doing that, and how would you encourage it?
You have to decide what platform, is important to you and how to use it. Like a few years back, when the whole Black Lives Matter movement started, on the campus of Elon, we had a march, and we marched through campus, and my players wanted to march. I told them, do what you feel is right for you in terms of voicing your opinion, and I marched right with them. For me as a leader, I'm trying to lead by example in terms of using my platform and my voice in terms of injustices. So I'm really open to that. And one of the things I want to say to the Elon students that are here and that are online, you are blessed beyond measure to be part of Elon University because they truly do care. When I first got here a couple of years ago, I experienced a situation where I was at the Chick-fil-A right in front of Walmart, and I was trying to be kind and allow some people to come out of the parking lot. And the guy behind me, he starts blowing his horn and going nuts simply because I'm letting a few cars out. The light turns red. I look in my side mirror. A white gentleman is getting out of his car, and I did not know what he was going to do. He comes up to my car and starts screaming the N-word at me and tells me that you have to get out of the way. Niggers got to get out of the way is what he told me probably like 7 times. That was the first time in my life I had ever experienced racism to my face. You talk about, I went through a gamut of emotions, from anger to wanting to retaliate. I mean, it was some ugly stuff flying through my head that I was going to spew back at him. And when I opened my mouth to speak, all I could say was, God bless you, even when he continued to say it. He gets in his car, he speeds off. I follow behind him to get his license plate, went to the police station. I mean, I sat there for hours, never addressed. And the first thing I did was I called my athletic director, Dave Blank. The next thing I know, I was on the campus of Elon with President Leo Lambert. I was with Gerald Francis. I don't know how many people. There were a lot of people in the room that looked exactly like the perpetrator, but they cared for me. What can we do to help you? So you are blessed to be part of a university that really does care when it comes to social injustice. And so I encourage my players to use your voice, use your platform, speak out. You know, I'm reaching out to them. I'm here. How can I help you? What do you want to do? You know, we all have the right to exercise that First Amendment right, the freedom of speech. And so I just say use that platform with a godly wisdom, though. Because we don't want to be a destructive force, because that takes us backwards. You know, but use your platform, use your voice. You know, I'm constantly on social media trying to educate and trying to lend my voice, and I encourage them to do the same. And I'm grateful for Elon University and everything that they've done throughout the years to support me. Because when you go through an experience like that, I will tell you, it changes your life. And you start to look at people differently. I went through a long period of time where when I would see a white male, I would get anxiety. I would get uncomfortable. Does he see me that way? Is he going to call me the N-word? And it took a while. It was a process to get past that. And then when incidents like this happens, it triggers stuff like that. And I'm walking through my neighborhood, and this morning I was bawling, crying, because it's like, why do I have to wake up to this? And there are things that trigger. Like, I'm walking through my neighborhood and I see a pickup truck, and I think of James Byrd. That's a trigger. A pickup truck is a trigger for me. I see chains hanging from the truck. That's a trigger. And now it's almost like, I guess the terminology is like racial trauma, or sort of like a PTSD. So it affects your life in that way, and it's a daily conscious effort to get past that, not allow hatred to seep in, not allow it to take a bitter root, and try to figure out, how can I make a difference? And the question that they ask me is, what can we do to help you? I'm the type of person, I process through music. We all process different ways. I said, well, here's a song that I started writing. Can you help me produce this song? I connected with a guy, Todd Coleman, at the Elon music department. And the song is still online to this day. If you Google on YouTube, Lord, Give Us Your Heart. And that was a song that I wrote. And it says, we are sisters, we are brothers. And you know, there was one line that I wrote in there where I said, God sees people, never color. And you know what I want to do? I really want to go back and change that, because God does see color. Because he created us all differently. And I think when we say he doesn't see color, we negate our differences, and when we should embrace them. So I would go back and change it and say God sees people, not just color, not never color, because he created us all differently, and we have to embrace those differences.
You know something, Charlotte? Coach Smith? I'm sorry. But I know that people say those words to you, but I'm sorry enough to figure out where the trenches are and get in the trench. Just want you to know that. So, does anybody in the room, maybe? Okay. This is a broad question, but a good one. This comes from one of our football players. What are some of the best resources, and I'm interested in this question as well, some of the best resources that you would recommend in order to educate ourselves on the topic of race and racism? Randy, you've been talking about that some, but can you be a catalyst to maybe begin to put some things in our hands that we can figure out how to get into our hearts maybe? Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah, I'll take a stab at it. I don't have all the answers. I don't claim to have all the answers at all. But I know some resources that have been helpful. So obviously I mentioned doing some reading will be helpful for learning. Ibram Kendi, Dr. Ibram Kendi, Stamped from the Beginning, is a book that was a prize-winning book. And it's a big book, but it's a good book, and it tells the origins of race and its development throughout time, particularly for the experiences of black people. So that is a huge resource that I would advise one to read. He's Stamped from the Beginning, and he recently came out with a second one that many people now are creating book clubs to read, and this is How to Be an Anti-Racist. And Dr. Kendi is the director of Anti-Racist Center at American University, but I heard that he recently moved to Boston University. So those are resources. But there are also some local resources, too, that are more active, engaged. And at Elon, we talk about engaged learning and experiential learning. So there's the Alamance Racial Equity Alliance. It's called AREA for short. Some of you may be familiar with this, but this is an organization that sponsors training to develop a racial analysis. I think that is a huge resource there. The source of this group here is the Racial Equity Institute in Greensboro, North Carolina, and this is an organization that travels across the country working with lots of law enforcement agencies, and other educational systems, public service systems as well. And they provide this 2-day training that helps people begin their development of a racial analysis. So I think those are some immediate things that one can think of or to exercise and explore to learn more. I won't take up all the airtime, so there may be
Good.
some other people there.
And Coach Trish, were you getting some of that down? I just think it would be, if you could pass it along to Trish or someone who could get that data out for those of us who would like to read some things, that would be really good.
I was going to say one other book is Elon's summer reading is the book called Biased. I've started reading that book, and it's really good. So I would encourage anybody that's affiliated with, just anybody in the room, but especially people who are affiliated with Elon, our summer reading is Biased. By Eberhardt is the last name, Jennifer Eberhardt.
Gary, I hope this is yes, I would never step in between a judge and the microphone.
Young people, we really want to hear from you. And I see a lot of timid eyes.
This is Michelle. We're new friends, right? Yes. Okay.
Hi, everyone. So my question is for our retired law enforcement that we have on the panel. And I think just in conversations with people, I think a lot of the questions that a lot of people have is a lot of whys, but mostly a lot of hows. How does it get to this level? Like, we know that police officers have to go to mandatory, minority sensitivity training. There are ways to submit complaints to officers. So if there are all these mechanisms that are supposed to be in place, how do we still get here? Who holds officers accountable? When officers receive complaints, where do they go? Who polices the police? If someone has 17 complaints against them, how are they still on the streets patrolling black neighborhoods? So I think that the why is an important question, but I think that people really want to start looking at the system of how is this even allowed to happen. So maybe if you guys could speak to a little bit about the systems that are in place or that are supposed to be preventing this. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was in North Carolina Highway Patrolman, we had what they call the Internal Affairs Division. And what that did is that it received complaints about excessive use of force and misconduct and other things that officers would do as those complaints came in. If they came in on a local level to the office, then they would certainly do a field investigation. I understand what you're saying because we're talking about this officer, this Derek Chauvin, who I believe had something like almost 20 excessive use of force complaints, and some of those were not even cleared as of yet. But the bigger question is to how. Just behind you to your right there is a young man whose name is Trooper Brian Leventhal. And when I was a North Carolina Highway Patrolman, I was his training officer. So what my job was to do was to show this young man how to be a North Carolina Highway Patrolman. And what I did was give him the benefit of those things that I learned as a young trooper and the importance of community relationship. So what would I do with him as we were out patrolling? I would have this young man pull over to a neighborhood store. I'd have him pull over to a community place, and I would introduce this young man and introduce him to the community, whether it was a black community or whether it was a white community or wherever we were, because I wanted him to understand that he was now a part of that community. And as a part of that community, it was more than just writing tickets. It was more than just pulling people over. It was more than just arresting individuals. He was a part of the community, and now, as a fixture of the community, it was his duty to understand the needs of the community, to assist and to hold up that moniker of protecting and serving. And this young man is one of the fine and sterling examples of what troopers should be, what law enforcement should be. But I think what we've seen in society that sometimes we feel like brawn is the necessary way to get things done. We all grew up watching, I was telling someone earlier, we all grew up watching Dirty Harry, that movie with Clint Eastwood and his brand of law enforcement. And Dirty Harry was a law enforcement department nightmare because he just didn't do it like it should be done. And when some people look at that level of enforcement and think that that flexing of their muscle gets them respect, let me tell you, it does not. It puts them at odds with the community. What gets respect is when you show it. And when you show a community that you're there to do just that and you respect them, you know what they will do? They will do the same thing to you. So that's the way complaints come in and are generally handled, and why it wasn't handled in this case, because it doesn't look like to me he should have been on the highway.
I want to speak to the how and why this continues to happen. It's because our justice system is broken and there's no accountability. Because to watch his face as he sat on his neck with his hands in his pocket without a care in his world, the system's broken. And when you think about policing and how policing was started in the South, do you know the history of why policing was started in the South? It was for the preservation of slavery. The police were formed to chase the runaway slaves. And when they captured the runaway slaves, they captured them, and most of the time they would cut off a limb or something to keep them from running away. So that was the origin of policing, and it's a systemic problem that has not changed. And back in the day, the Ku Klux Klan, they wanted the Ku Klux Klan to infiltrate the policing system. And you still have that problem to today. And that's #facts.
Great, Judge.
God has blessed me to have the opportunity to be a judge here in Alamance County. And I hold that responsibility dear to my heart. When I put on that black robe, I realize that that robe is greater than I am. I tell officers when they put on that badge is greater than they are. I have a responsibility. I believe every judge in this state, in this great country, has a responsibility to work hard, diligently, to increase people's faith in the judicial system. We talk often about how people have a distrust for the police who are part of the judicial system. People have a distrust for attorneys. People have a distrust for judges. So it's my responsibility to help people to believe in our system and know that our system can be fair. It can be consistent as far as ensuring that everyone has equal access to justice and everybody has an opportunity to be heard. I would sit here and lie to you, and I refuse to lie to you to say that everybody believes in our system, because it's not true. But I assure you that I'm doing everything that I can, and I try to hold those who are my peers responsible to do the same thing. And I encourage you to make sure that your leadership does the same thing. Because this, I learned visually, Pastor. We're here because an African-American man was laying on the ground. Coach, can you come in, please? I want you to kneel on my belly. Put your knee in my neck. Put your knee on my back, Coach. I can't. Put your weight on my body as I sit here and I cry for my mother. And I tell you I can't breathe. And you put your weight on me for 5 minutes. Why aren't you doing it, Coach? How do you see me? Why are you afraid of me? What have I done to hurt you? You don't know me. I'm laying there. I'm a black man, and I'm laying there, and I'm a judge. How do you see me? I need you to see me. I need you as a white man to see me as a man. And I shouldn't have to ask you. Because I see you as the man that you are. And I'm going to respect you. And I'm going to love you. And I'm going to treat you how you should be treated. But I'm on my stomach. And I'm screaming, saying, I can't breathe.
I see you as George Floyd. I see George Floyd. I see a victim. I'll hug you, but I'm not putting my weight on your head, on your back.
Do you respect me enough?
I respect you as I'm.
I
With
just
everything
met
I
you
have.
today. I just met you today. Have I ever met you before? And I'm telling you, you're my friend. And I want you to have university. I'm just,
How y'all doing?
You okay with my, I'm pretty clean, I think. Okay.
How y'all doing? My name is Donovan Williams. I'm a grad student athlete at Elon. I recently transferred here. Haven't been here for too long. I was thinking of a good way to form this question. You know, the older I get, the more I start to realize stuff. And as a young African-American man, you know, pretty large in size, I feel like I find myself constantly having to make other people around me feel comfortable or not see me as a threat. What would you say to people who look like me, are built like me or stereotype like me? What would you say to those people who constantly feel like, you know, when I'm walking in the park and I pass a white couple, I feel like I have to initiate and smile and speak first in order to instill that image in their mind, like, oh, okay, he's safe. What would you say to someone like me who thinks that way?
Great question, y'all. Anybody want to? Mr. Mark?
Well, you're giving me an experience that I would be patronizing if I say I understand, because I don't. But I can tell you, when I see you stand before me if you or came into my office, or I encountered you in public, and I would love to talk to you, because my first instinct when I meet people in our community and talk to them, this is a unique situation that we're in what's happening right now. The profession that I answered the calling to be a part of, I feel like it's an area of ministry and to be involved in it. And I can just tell you, there's times where you'd rather be doing something else. But I know that Coach Smith and I were talking earlier tonight, and we were just talking, and she made a statement. I just have to, and I'm paraphrasing, Coach, you may want to speak to this. I just have to make a difference in my sphere. So what I constantly do, we're among, no offense to the other players in here, because it applies to other sports, but in football you have to have your head on a swivel. So in my profession, I'm looking to recruit. I mean, I encounter people all the time, and I'm like, how are you? What do you do? You know, what's going on in your life? Those kinds of things. Have you ever thought about law enforcement? I'm constantly doing that. And so I don't want to diminish what your experience is, but if I encounter you, I'm wanting to engage. I see a young man of potential, and I see someone who is going to make a difference in this world, and you are a man, and you're going to be in a position, God willing, at some time to make a difference in your sphere. So I'm constantly looking to say, don't give up on this profession. Come and be a part of it. Have you ever thought serving, and not necessarily in law enforcement, have you thought about serving in other areas of service in our world? And what can we do to make a difference? So I am, again, sorry for those kind of encounters, and it's a shame that we have that. It's a shame that those things go on. Coach Smith talked about the events at Elon. And when she was there in March, I was in that march. Marched in Burlington. We will be doing that again Monday. So we try to make a difference whenever we can, wherever we are, and whatever we do. This community. One thing I want to talk about this community specifically, if I may, just for a minute. And this is not to take away from the issues that we face all over this country. Every time, I've told folks, every time that something occurs that, it's a shame like this, it causes a deep ache because there are people that I serve with and that we know and that we've served with who are trying to make a difference. And you just want to serve people. You just want to serve your community. You want to love people. You want to do what Jesus said. Treat others the way you want to be treated. See people as your brothers and your sisters. Care for them. And one of the responsibilities I have as the Chief Deputy of Alamance County Sheriff's Office is, and I had as the Chief of Police in Elon, and as I served as the State Bureau of Investigation Special Agent and Special Agent in charge. We review those kinds of things that take place in this country. I want to go back to Michelle, what you said earlier. I have the same question. How does a person like that operate in my profession? How are they there? How do we have this? It's a shame. How do these things happen? And we have to have our heads on swivels and keep each other accountable. I need to be kept accountable. We keep each other accountable. We are our brother's keeper. If I can't be oblivious to what might be going on around me and just not even care or think about it. I have to intervene. Among our profession, we have to intervene in the middle of an incident. We have to do the things that are right. We have to do the right things. We have to stop this pattern of constant negative encounter, not only among from the authority to the citizen, but just everyday encounters that you have. The profession that I'm in and the judge is in are the only two professions that we operate in our sphere that we can take somebody's freedom from them. Think about that responsibility. When I stood before the judge and raised my hand, I put my hand on the Word of God, and I raised my hand. I took an oath. And with that comes great responsibility. You can take somebody's freedom. It carries a weight that can't be. You can't just not take that seriously. I can't just be in my little world and not think about that. I have to constantly be thinking about what's going on around me. What is happening in our community? I was just looking over some material, and this is just interesting to me because I was a history student at Elon, and I look into the profession that I serve in, and some of you may or may not have heard of this gentleman, Sir Robert Peel, Principles of Law Enforcement. He's considered the father of modern law enforcement. He wrote, there's 9 principles here, and you know when he wrote them? 1829. They are as applicable now as ever, and we're still trying to get this right. Number 2, I'll just bring one up. The ability of the police to perform their duties is dependent upon public approval of police existence, actions, behavior, and the ability of the police to secure and maintain public respect. That's just one. Go back and pull up Peel's principles. It's all over. You'll just see he's considered, again, the father of what they call modern policing. We are in a period where the judge was talking about 2020. We're in the 21st century. And in law enforcement, we have guidelines. It's called 21st century policing. And every day you're striving to do those things. It should be innate within us as humans to each other. But you're constantly striving to do that. And we still find ourselves in these times, in these situations. A man, as the judge said, is crying out, "I can't breathe," and there are officers standing right there. How can you hear that and not do anything? So I can tell you from my chair, we strive to hold accountability. We try to serve our community. We're trying to do the right thing. And I want my students here at Elon and those that may be listening online, those that want to come here, come, be a part of this community. It's a good community. Not perfect, but a good community. We are close with the law enforcement leaders in this county. We have 8 law enforcement agencies in this county. Some are represented out here tonight. Elon University, from Elon University Police Department, Elon, Gibsonville, Mebane, Graham, Burlington, Hall River, the Sheriff's Office, and excuse me, that's just the local municipalities I'm talking about. We have Highway Patrol, alcohol law enforcement. We have SBI. We have federal agents that live in this community. This community has a diverse group of law enforcement here. And the people that we know and serve with are striving every day to make this the kind of community that people feel like they can trust their law enforcement, that we care. And so I want you to come and be a part of this community. And if you ever don't feel safe, we will do whatever we can to correct that. I want you to consider this profession. This isn't a time to step away from it and to turn away, but to press in, to lean in. First and foremost, what gets me through is my faith in Jesus Christ. So that would be the first place I turn. And then to look at ways we can serve. So lean in here. I had a young, in the midst of tragedies and these things that happen, and your soul aches and your heart aches, and you get up and you just go about your business and you do it. Yesterday in our office, we had a young man sitting in there, 20 years old, African American, asking, he says, I want to serve in law enforcement. In college, finishing it up, but he wants to serve. And you just look at him, he looks like, he's younger than my children. He could be, you just love him like a father. I'm a grandfather now, so you just see folks, you just want to love on them. And I'd have freaked him out. I just want to hug up on him, because here's a young man who wants to make a difference in our community and in our, in this profession. And he's sitting there. So it encourages you to say, oh yeah, come on, we need you.
Great question, Donovan. And so thanks for asking that. That's, I wish I could explain that to you, because your experience is the real deal. I get that. But maybe this is going to be a part of the solution, yes? That we can talk and trust, learn to trust, which, by the way, Judge, am I right? Trust has to be earned. You don't trust me because I told you you could. It's a long relationship. Yep. Yeah.
I'm Doug Green, and I'm an assistant district attorney here in Alamance County, and I wanted to address your question. And not that Chief Parker didn't, but you said, what can you do in a situation where, because you are a large black man and you're walking along a path and a white couple come and you encounter a white couple, or you're in a situation where you're in a room or a party or somewhere just sitting around with other white students, and you don't want them to feel intimidated. What can you do? I would tell you, you do absolutely nothing. You know who you are. It is not up to you. It's up to them to accept you as just a human being that who's just walking along the path, enjoying the day like they are. So what it's going to take is, it's going to they're going to have to change a mindset, because I think Barack Obama said it within the last couple of days. This has been going on for 400 years. It's been a systemic problem, a systemic thing that has programmed people, white people, to look at us in a certain way. So you have to start with education. But I tell you, you don't do anything. You are who you are. You can't fix the fact that you're big, you're tall, and you are a man of color. As long as you carry yourself in an upstanding way, which I know you do, that's not your problem. That's their problem. Now we got to get to change that, so that maybe they smile first, and say, "Hey, how are you doing?" first, where you have to feel like you have to do it. You don't have to do that. It's nice that you smile, because I'm assuming you're from the South, and that's kind of how we're taught. But please don't diminish who you are because of someone else's ignorance. Okay? And Coach Smith, and I got to go here. I just wanted to. You said the system is broke, and Coach Smith, I have to disagree. And I disagree in the sense that we do have a system, as we've all said and heard, is probably one of the best in the world. It's the people in the system. And until, again, we change those leaders and change their hearts and change their mindset, and I'm not trying to get political, but me and Pastor Williams was talking, and because I was like, how do y'all weed out, as law enforcement, how can you weed out those bad apples? And he said leadership, and he said something. Again, this particular president, I remember about 2 years ago, indicated or said, when you're arresting someone, they talked about pushing their head down and getting, don't push, just shove them in the car. Well, that empowers people. Well, if I'm hearing that from my leader, well, shoot, I can do that. Okay, I'll do that. And I'm not going to get in trouble. So I think we just have to make sure we put good people in those leadership positions, and that will trickle down. Because if the leader will not tolerate it, then the people who work under that leader will stop what they're doing.
That's interesting. I appreciate this. I'm glad we can have dialogue to hear different perspectives. But I even think about previous leaders, and police brutality existed during previous leaders as well. Again, I think we would be remiss and we would be off target if we continue to put it on individual cases and individual people and not respect the system. Because the system, I get what Charlotte is saying, but I don't think the system is broke. I think it's doing what it's intended to do. And the people change people out, the system still prevails. So I just really want to quickly highlight that. And I'm sorry, I may be giving some unsettling truths tonight, but I'm just sharing my space.
Let me say something to everybody here and certainly Counselor. I'm broken. I'm a broken person. I have a sin nature. I need guardrails. I need people around me. I preach around here about making sure that you make sure you have a personal board of directors. You have people around you to hold you accountable, to pay attention if you are starting to drift in some way. Judge, something is broken in the human spirit, but there is an answer to that. I just as soon have you preach, but I'll tell you, we want to be hope-filled people, but for you and me, hope has a name. And that's, and our God is all about change from the inside out. And if something is broken inside of a human being, and there's bitterness or hatred or racism or an inability to be able to look at another, your powerful words were human being. This is going to sound crazy. This is kind of trite. But, we're dog people, my wife and I. So we've had dogs. I can't go, she does it. I can't go when, a year and a half ago, we had to let Chuck go. I can't go in that room. He's a dog. And we're talking about human beings here. So there's something way down in deep inside a person's soul, character, psyche, whatever you want to say. But for those of us who have a spiritual component inside there, we kind of know. Michelle, are you busting to say something? Because I'm going to ask.
Student question over here.
Yes, sir. Well, she's a student also. She's in law school.
So my name is Chuck Hanna. I'm going to be a junior at Elon. And
Chuck, forgive us, sir. Can you speak a little louder?
all right. I'm Chuck Hanna. I'm a junior, going to be a junior at Elon, and I'm from Boston. And obviously I'm a black male, and I'm just going to judge because you told us to tell us how we're feeling. So I'm going to tell you how I'm feeling, and then I'm going to follow it up with a question after that. So my initial reaction to the entire thing
Can you do me a favor, Chuck? Because we want to hear you. We want to hear you, sir. Walk on up there, Chuck. Try to. And I want them to hear you as well.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So I'm telling you, my feelings when it first happened was I felt numb, because I felt numb back in 2016 when Terrence Crutcher stopped on the side and pulled over his car and asked for a cop to come help him out. And he was fatally shot. And from then on, every time that something like that's happened, I don't know how to react. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know how to react because it scares the hell out of me. It scares the hell out of me knowing that as soon as I'm born, I have to worry about racism, police brutality, and even black-on-black crime. Because the day that George Floyd incident happened, there were 8 people from where I was born in Boston that were shot over something as small. My second feeling was that my life expectancy, no matter what lifestyle I live, is day to day compared to my white friends who can live to 70, 80 years old no matter what lifestyle they live. And I literally feel like there's 3 targets on my back every time I step out my door. And even in my room, I don't feel safe sometimes. Like, I make it a point to lock my door and lock my own room door just because who knows what's going to happen. And I understand talking, like, that's my outlet. Like, I've had a lot of conversations with many people about how I'm feeling. But at some point, even with the protest, talking still isn't doing much. Like, there's still tear gas being thrown, there's rubber bullets being thrown, people are being killed. So what's the next step? Like, I know that there's not going to be an answer in this moment, but even for me, talking doesn't do it for me completely. And I'm not much of a protester because I know, based on what I've seen, there was a protest that happened in Boston that turned into a riot. And I'm fearful that that's going to happen, and I don't want to put myself in that situation. So what is the next step? As a black male, for myself personally and for everybody else in this room, like, what's the next step that we could possibly do to become active in our community, to start some sort of change? Because at this point, I'm trying to hold on to hope and positivity, but it's really hanging by a thread.
I want to thank you first and foremost Chuck, I want to thank you first and foremost for allowing yourself to be vulnerable and have that honest conversation. What's next? I'm going to tell you what's next. I will be speaking to our sheriff. I will be speaking to every chief of police. And one of the things that I'm going to challenge our leadership to do is to choose the right officers. We have excellent police officers here in Alamance County. Are they perfect, Chuck? No, sir. Everybody's not perfect. Nobody is. I'm not perfect. I have flaws. But one of the challenges, because I literally have called every single police chief. Chief Parker can tell you if I'm lying. And I said, whatever you need from me to help mend or help strengthen the relationships between the police and our community, I'm here. That's my responsibility as a judge. The police don't always get it right. People who charge don't always get it right. Do you understand what I'm saying? But we have excellent officers here. We have to have an in-depth vetting system that also looks at mental health of individuals coming to apply for jobs within our police department to ensure that we try, and we have a good vetting system. It needs to be even better. Because we can't afford as a people, when I say as a people, I mean all people, to have an officer who he or she should not be in that position of authority. Let me tell you what else I would love for you to do, Chuck, is to take that passion that you have and every young person that's around you, one, be their role model. Show them how you're supposed to do it. Whether they're black, white, Hispanic, love them. When you see an officer, shake his or her hand. Talk to them. Hate does not fix hate. Violence, Chuck, does not fix violence. But being honest enough to say, I'm scared sometimes. Chuck, I used to be scared driving in my car and I see the blue lights. Now when I see the blue lights, because it's happened to me, Chuck, when I was a DA, I was pulled in one of our local cities because I dropped my girlfriend off at 4 o'clock in the morning because she was taking a group of 40 kids to DC. And I drove through a parking lot area that had a new facility. I just didn't know that area, and I drove through. Bright lights went on, Chuck. Long story as short as I can make it, I was pulled over. I kept my hands, Chuck, 10-2 on the steering wheel because I've been trained through education. An officer walking up on you, don't sit there and move because, Chuck, if I'm all the way over here and it's pitch black and I'm reaching for my glove compartment, I'm reaching for my ID or I'm reaching for my registration, the officer doesn't know that's what I'm reaching for. The adrenaline starts pumping, Chuck. So I kept my hands 10-2. Officer walked up, asked for my license. I said, officer, may I retrieve my license from my right pocket? She said yes. I said, I'm slowly reaching my hand to my right pocket. I'm retrieving my license. Officer, am I able to reach to the glove compartment for my registration? I reached. She said yes. I reached over, got my registration. I said, officer, here it is. And then I said, education. I said, officer, what is the reasonable suspicion for your stop? The officer then went to the vehicle, came back. I was listening to Kirk Franklin. I needed Jesus. But Chuck, she came back and she said, look, you have to understand that you are in a high crime area. I said, ma'am, With all due respect, officer, I didn't know where I was, and even if I did, whether I'm in a high crime area or not, and then I stopped myself because my mom always taught me to respect authority, even if the authority is wrong. But what did I do after that, Chuck? I got in my car, I drove off, I made a report to that police department the next day. I say all that to you, Chuck, to say I don't hate her. I wouldn't hurt her. But I'm going to make sure when I called that that chief, guess what I said to the chief? I said, my name is Larry Brown. I'm an assistant district attorney in Alamance County, North Carolina, and I was racially profiled. What I'm saying to you, Chuck, is I still love police. I still love defendants. I still love people. And I refuse to take that hurt and allow it to change who you are. Mr. Green said to the gentleman, you have to still be who you are. Chuck, be who you are. Treat people with respect. Show them who you truly are by being the wonderful man that you are. Do you hear me? But the concern I have is, it may very well be, everybody in this room may have a situation just like yours. Do you stop? Do you stop caring? Do you stop getting your education? Make a difference, Chuck. That's what you're here for.
And can I say, one of the ways that we can make a difference is that we exercise our right to vote. You know, there were for years I did not vote because I was like, I don't want anything to do with politics. So I encourage you young people, you know, we got some great people in positions of authority, you know, but you have to educate yourself on people who are running for these offices and exercise your right to vote.
So, Judge, I'm just curious. Thanks, Chuck. That's a powerful moment. If Tony Trisciani was in that parking lot, would he have to do what you did? Would he have to do the 10 and 2? Officer, I'm going to reach slowly in my right back pocket to get my driver's license. I mean, in all likelihood, I know I'm asking, it's a subjective type question, but I mean, would he have to do that, or did you have to do that because you're black?
I've never thought about that question before. I've never thought. I would answer, one, I would say to Coach, he should react like that. He should, because you want to make sure to defuse an already possible hostile situation, because that officer, he or she, doesn't know what you're reaching for. So you stay 10 to 2. Do I believe that I was stopped in that situation as an African-American man? I would believe in that situation I was not, because it was 4 o'clock in the morning and the officer was not in a position at that point to see me. I look for the good in people, but I also know what it feels like to drive down a one-way street in an area that I didn't know, and I get pulled over, and I'm face down on the ground with 5 officers with their guns pointed at my head. And I'm screaming, I didn't know it was a one-way street. I didn't know. Please don't shoot me. I know what that feels like. And I was in a wonderful neighborhood, a rich neighborhood. And I drove down the one-way street. And the officer said the reason was because my tags were bad. And I just bought a new car that I paid for at 17 years old because I worked for it. In that situation, I was racially profiled. And I told, when she came back and said, I stopped you because you have to realize you're in a bad neighborhood. That's why I told the chief, I believe I was racially profiled for the simple fact, why would you sit there and say, you're going to stop me just because I'm in a bad neighborhood? But did I hate her? No. Was I hurt? Yes. Did I go and throw a brick through a window? No. I know that people, we are frustrated. I know that as we're hurt, violence does not beget violence.
So I want to tell you one thing that we talk about this and how it makes an impact. So Judge Brown did a very powerful demonstration for young law enforcement, a few BLET classes, so basic law enforcement training class, BLET. It's where officers go through their training and they come for their graduation. Judge Brown was asked to speak, and as you saw tonight, the visual impact it can make. And so having Judge Brown stand before this group, and he started in his suit, and he began to talk and tell a story, and he slowly began to take his suit off and his clothes. And yes, he did. And he could tell it much better. He basically got down to where he was in his baggy gym shorts and a hoodie, and made the comment to our young officers that he's a judge. You see him as a judge when he was standing there speaking before him. And I think you asked a question, Judge, what do you see now? And those kind of impacts within that you're trying to break in and break culture and cycles and teach and get people to think about the right things to do. Having someone like Gary Williams be your field training officer, how powerful is that? But not everybody gets that. So you have to individually make that decision, because you may very well end up with a field training officer who's not a Gary Williams, but you have to make an independent decision to not do things if it's a broken culture or wrong within that. And I'm talking about subcultures. I'm not talking about our culture in general. So those kinds of things that the judge did that makes an impact, those are ways, those folks that I sat in that room, and I've been in law enforcement 37 years. At that time, it was probably 36 or so, I don't know. But it made an impact on me. What kind of impact did that make on those young officers?
And Chuck, don't be afraid. Where you at, Chuck? Don't be afraid of your experiences. They make you who you are. You have to tunnel all of that, sir, and turn it into something good. Chuck, I'm telling you, I've never met you, and I'm saying to you, you have a responsibility to succeed. Failure is not an option for you. But you take all of your experiences that make you the wonderful man that you are to make you a better person. Do you hear me? I can't change the past, but I'm going to do everything that I can to positively affect the future. Not just for me, because I believe that God holds us responsible for the sphere of influence where we can help. I can't help, what I'm trying to say, Chuck, I can't help an old lady right now crossing the street who's 90 years old in Chicago right now. If I was in Chicago, I would help her across the street. I don't believe God's going to hold me responsible for that. But if I walk outside and I see a 90-year-old woman walking across the street who needs help, and I don't help her and I have the ability to, and something happens to her, I believe that God's going to hold me responsible, because he placed us there. He placed me there to help. He's placed me here in Alamance County right now to help, because it's my responsibility. And I don't take it lightly. Chuck, I take everything that I've gone through in my life, and I want to use it for good. Do the same, you hear me?
I'm Josh Pierre. I'm with the men's basketball staff. I'm not a student athlete or anything, but I'm rather young. I just got done playing a few years ago. I think that my parents have really taught me that humans are humans no matter what. I think the hard thing that I'm struggling with right now, and we talked about it with our awesome staff that we have, but I know that everybody's experience with being black in America is different. And I think that's really unique and important, because the different avenues that everyone is able to put themselves in for change. And for me, I grew up where I was always the only black guy in my class, the only black guy in my friend group, on basketball teams. And right now, I just got married a month ago. My wife is white as well. And so the hardest thing for me as I'm trying to navigate my whole life with my parents who grew up in times of injustice where, my mom, grew up at a time where she integrated schools as well as my dad. And what I'm struggling with right now is, and for my parents, we believe that Jesus came to save our life, and that's kind of how that's the foundation of us. And he just changed my heart at a really young age for people, no matter where they're from or what they look like. And I just want to know from you guys' experiences being older men, especially black men and white, obviously, and women as well, how can I use my experience with people who are white, like my wife or my friends? How can I use my experience with my family members that are black and my black friends without trying or having to feel like I'm selling out for the white people, if that makes sense? I know that's a difficult, or I'm trying to frame it the right way, but I don't see white people, all white people, as I try not to group them all together. And I know that young people like myself, there's people like that as well, and people obviously like with your relationships, but it's just something that I've been trying to navigate through, especially at home where we're on the battlefront with a black male and a white woman every day.
Great question, everybody.
As I said earlier, I was the first African-American trooper in this county. And as a young trooper and coming to a county in law enforcement, I found that I was the pink elephant, because I didn't know where I belonged. If I went into the black neighborhood, they said that I was working for the man. If I went into the white neighborhoods, I got called those names that Coach had already said earlier. So I began to wonder, where exactly did I belong? Where was my place? But I thank God I had a mother that told me the essence of being not only true to yourself, but treating people decent. And that's what I began to do. And I began to get that respect not only in the black community, but I also began to get it in the white community. I was the chaplain over the Alamance County Jail, a place where the higher ups or the powers that be didn't even want me to be here as the first black trooper. And I became the first black chaplain over that jail. So the same people that I would arrest, I'd come back to that jail and I would preach to. And I would preach to them. And sometimes like 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm in that jail preaching till I didn't even have a voice. And so what was I doing? I was arresting them on one day, and then the next day I was going in there and giving them Christ Jesus and telling them that not only did Jesus love them, but we love them as well. Hugging those inmates and hugging those individuals that have been incarcerated. And they saw this individual. And I can tell you, young man, that today I've probably gone to just about every white church in this community and preached. I'm a pastor at a black congregation. The point I'm trying to get to you is this, that if those characteristics that you portray and that Christ is giving you right now, just to stand up and say, listen, I had nothing to do with the way I look, but I have something to do with who I am. And so if you instill those values and you go about that, don't worry about who accepts you, because he's already accepted you. And you can make an impact in others just that same way. I challenge you to do that.
Is that the introduction of your sermon? No, man. Coach, I'm not sure why I thought of this, but I looked it up this afternoon just to be sure. And there was a film that you probably saw, a movie, Chariots of Fire, which was a pretty cool story about Eric Liddell, who was an Olympic star a long time ago, but he's from Scotland, and maybe y'all know the story, but there's a point in the movie where he's standing on the seashores at at those right beside those golf courses that you want to play someday. But and he made a speech, and he said this: "Where does the power come from to see the race to its end?" He was an extraordinarily good runner, set the 400 record for a long time back in the 20s. Where does the power come from to see the race to its end? Is 400 years long enough? That's not a rhetorical question. Is 400 years long enough for this? It is to me. You got that right. And Eric Little said, from within. From within, all of you, all of us, we've got to find it somewhere in here. And Coach Trish, we don't know exactly where this goes from here. And we don't either. But we're talking. And I'm so glad that y'all were here. 400, that's long enough, Randy. Come on. I mean, you know, this is way, we got to get it. You know, we got to get it right. Charlotte, no more of that. No more stuff. Yeah. And no more of that bad stuff. You know, I mean, we've got to figure out where, you know, Judge, there's something way down deep inside of you, brother. I mean, I've always known that, but I saw some brand new stuff tonight. So good for you on that. You know, and I'm going to have to, my coach buddy here is going to have some counseling after that little situation that you put him through. But that was a powerful moment. And I appreciate the emotions, because there are lots of emotions in this room that they're in there. And we all have something in there. I mean, we're human beings, and we all have something in there. So if we can find it within, and every single person in this room, I mean, athletes are, you guys and ladies are incredible, because you have this platform that's just given to you. It's handed to you. You're the head football coach at a Division I university. That's a platform. We've got to figure out how to use the platforms. That's what you were talking about, Judge, that every one of us has a circle of influence. And so I'm kind of when I preach, I'm kind of an iconic kind of guy, and I even do this with the football team sometimes, Coach. But so on your way out, although you do have some, Margaret, don't you have some? You got a whole bunch of stuff back there that you're going to give away. But but one of the things, one of the things that I would challenge you to do is, y'all have all seen you've all seen these videos. If you haven't, y'all to look one up, a YouTube video where people set up these dominoes. You know, they'll set up like 50,000 dominoes and tip it, and y'all seen that? You know what I'm talking about? One of the images that means a lot to me, and some of the football players in here have heard me say this before, is that somebody has to tip the first domino for there to be a chain reaction. And I carry a domino in my pocket all the time. It's crazy. It's a kind of a foolish thing, Coach, really. But you know what? Every time I reach in my pocket, it's a reminder to me that today, I guarantee you I influenced somebody today. One way or the other. Maybe I was careless or negligent, but in one way or the other, I tipped a domino. So there's a box of dominoes back there. Pick one up, put it in your pocket, and there you go. There's a whole bunch of them in there for y'all. So, and just lay it on your dresser, wherever. And just remind yourself that every day in your platform, it is your responsibility to tip a domino and then allow that to become influential. Does that make sense? That would certainly be my challenge to you. So get some cookies and dominoes on the way out. And everybody okay? All right, now watch this. I'm gonna. This is you talk about a risky thing. I'm going to do. You really want to say something, don't you, Michelle? Do you? Oh, okay. That's okay. All right. So now watch this. Watch what I want. Yeah, man. Here, come on up.
I'm Alan Payne. I'm an assistant coach for men's basketball here at Elon. And the domino effect kind of said something to me. Okay, so I think what we did here tonight is great. I do. I think it's a good step, and I think what we were able to do is to acknowledge that there are issues and there is a problem. But I think the next step is real action. And I hope I don't come off like rude when I say this. Okay, Judge, I really appreciate what you said about how you've called every chief, you've called every person and person of power to try and use your influence that you have within the system. But one of the things that I think that can happen, and this is just me personally, is that white people, and we're being, again, this is uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable standing here. This is an uncomfortable topic. Okay, and I've gone back and forth. We've had great talks with our staff. They've allowed me to speak freely and openly. And by no means do I want to diminish your role, your everything that you've accomplished, where you sit, literally your seat, and what you do. Okay, and I think that's great. But at the same time, because of what I heard you say, that it is systemic, you're still black. My question is, Chief Parker, and I respect you for being here, and I think that you're a man of God just based off of sitting over here. I've never met you. I've never met any of you other than Coach Smith and Dr. Williams here. My question to you, or I should say, I know that not everybody in your position that has the power and the status that you have, they're not like you. I know that because of where we are. This is the South. Okay, let's just be honest about this. We talked about stepping outside of our fear or affecting change in our fear. I challenged some of our staff. We have 2 black members and 4 white members on our staff. I challenged our staff to step out and denounce racism and things of that nature when it happens. Not to disassociate yourself, not to step away from it, to literally step in and make yourself, I think, Coach Smith, I think you said, become comfortable with being uncomfortable. Will you do that? Can you do that? Amongst, again, using your, you said you handle all the case, or you see at least some of the cases, and you said you're still wondering how it happens too, right? Well, it seems like, and again, I don't know where your rank is and everything, but chief sounds pretty high to me. I'm ignorant to that. Like, I'm not being funny, okay? Like, but you have some real, I think, influence and authority. Will you step up in the face of that stuff and really, really attack it head on? I know you said that that you've protested, you've marched, and I think that's great. I think that's a great example. I think that's a great action. Okay, but again, bluntly, we can do that on our own. We've been doing that on our own. We're still in 2020. Again, having this same panel, having this same conversation. So the next thing is that, again, the white people that are in power, are you going to use that influence to help bring change to all of this stuff? It's going to be uncomfortable, but I don't even think I need an answer, but I just want to know, like, is that something that can happen?
Great question. Yeah. Yeah. You understand, Dr. Cliff? Yep. Okay. Anybody else? One last thing? No? No, I just don't want to, I don't want to create an issue for somebody. You got a curfew? No. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. How are you doing? My name is Edgar Isidore Farmer Jr. I want to respect my father because he gave me a good name. Okay. Oh, okay. Excuse me. Edgar Isidore Farmer Jr. I don't want to disrespect my father. He gave me a great name. Okay, so I'm going to respect that. But one of our players has an excellent question. Okay, it's for Coach Smith or any other coach. Would you have a problem if a student athlete were to kneel during the anthem before an event? I want to, before you answer that, I just want to share, like you said, speak how you feel, okay? I think it's important that we recognize all these great young student athletes who are in this room tonight, okay? Because that's powerful, okay? It's one thing to be an adult. It's one thing to be an adult, okay? But it takes a lot of courage to be a student athlete and be vulnerable enough to share your emotions. Because when you speak from the heart, you can never be wrong. So I appreciate you. I appreciate what you said. Okay, that's important. So thank you for being here, because this is almost like a funeral. You know, when you're at a funeral, people bring the chicken and the macaroni and cheese and everybody's hugging and they make you feel good. But at 3 weeks later, where are we? Say 3 weeks from now, we need to have this same energy for one another, the same love for one another. Sorry. Love you.
Yes, sir. Coach, thank you. Yeah. And that's, I think way deep down inside of us, all of us are, you know, there's a rip in our spirits right now to say, you're right. This is not, we can't just shoot off the fireworks and then business as usual. Business as usual hasn't worked. Legislation hasn't worked. If legislation would work, it would have already worked. Politics can't fix this. You know, it's not a political issue. It's a systemic human issue, and we've just got to, you know, we've got to be the catalyst or the start of this. Anybody? Oh, I'm not in a hurry. Football players, they don't have a curfew? Okay, no curfew. Yes.
Yeah, I got. Yeah, there's a lot.
Thanks. Did you just call me out? I appreciate it. Thank you.
You know, there's a lot of controversy surrounding the whole kneeling during the anthem. And I think a lot of people, you know, that revolves around Kaepernick. You know, a lot of people said that Kaepernick, you're wrong for kneeling. But, you know, we got so fixated on him kneeling and feeling like he's disrespecting the flag that we have never addressed the issue as to why he was kneeling. Now, you have a right to kneel, but at the same time, you have to be prepared to deal with the repercussions of kneeling, because it will create a lot of friction, a lot of issues, a lot of problems. And to be perfectly honest with you, in the world that I'm in, it's uncomfortable because you're worried and concerned about, okay, well, what is this booster going to say? What is this person going to say? But I will say, if you're not registered to vote, if you're not trying to do something else proactive, outside of kneeling, then, you know, my issue is I just don't want it to be a show and act. You know, are you really concerned? Are you really being proactive in doing things out in the community to make a difference? But it's your right. I can't tell you not to kneel. Anybody else?
You know who this is? Are you going to ask your dad a question? Oh, come on, ask him a crazy question like, can you stay out? How old are you? Oh, so you're an adult now.
Yes, sir.
I tell you, adulthood is overrated sometimes.
A little.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm going to direct my question to Mr. Brown. I was going to ask about citizens' arrest and if it's indeed a constitutional right, and if such a thing exists, why do we go straight to protesting, and why is citizens' arrest not ever an option?
Well, each state, that's a good question. Each state has the authority. That's a good question, my friend. Each state has the authority to create, through their legislature, different laws. So each state can have the ability, if they choose to have citizens arrest, things of that nature, the state can choose. such as, and I don't want to bore you at all, but like in North Carolina, a private citizen, if he or she believes that a crime has been committed against them, they can go to the magistrate, and if the magistrate finds something called probable cause for the arrest, the magistrate can charge. So that's something that is in North Carolina. It may not be in California. It may not be in Ohio, because each state is able to create laws for within their state. They must comply with the federal government, because the federal government is the overarching legal block, if that makes sense. Why do we go straight to protest? People protest because they want to be heard. There are different ways to protest. The Greensboro Four protested. Rosa Parks protested. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. protested. Justice Thurgood Marshall protested. But there are different ways to go about protesting. Am I here to say to you, I'm telling you, I don't believe for me that violence and the answer to violence is more violence. For example, for all these young brothers, and when I say brothers, I mean black and white, you are blessed to have the opportunity to obtain a higher education at an excellent institution called Elon University. Do you think I want any of you, because you're hurt, because you're frustrated, because you're angry, and I'm not going to say I'm in church, because you're upset, do you think I want you to then go and destroy property at Elon? Because everything that you and your parents and your grandparents have worked for can be gone just like that. Am I saying don't protest? No. I'm saying that as you have a right to peaceably assemble, do you think I want you out there destroying property, then all of a sudden you turn around? Because understand, every job that you go to get hired for is going to run a criminal background check. And all of a sudden you are now charged with a felony. You're charged with a misdemeanor. Understand, I wouldn't be a judge if it wasn't for people getting arrested so that I would have the right to vote, so that I would have the right to get an education. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying to you, you have to protest in a way that your voice can be heard and for you to be understood. That answer may be connect with these two amazing people right here who will make sure that your voices are heard. I just don't want to see any more destruction. I don't want to see any more death. I don't want to see any more bloodshed. 400 years is enough. So what's going to happen when we go to clean up our streets? I want to know what's the plan 5 days from now. I want to know what's the plan 15 days from now. But I know that I have a relationship with this amazing man of God, this amazing man of God, this amazing woman of God, that we can go ahead, let's plan 15 days from now. And maybe that is a peaceful protest. Because my friend, let me tell you one thing I've learned in my short life. There are power in numbers. Why do you think Coach was talking about voting? Because when you vote, people have to listen.
No pressure after that. I just wanted to, I would be remiss if I didn't say this thought that crossed my mind, but it came to me after these young gentlemen's questions, because I have a baby brother that's a football player at another university, and he's a teddy bear, but he is large, and I know that that is his experience of. And so I guess I say all that to say, if there's anyone in this room, non-black, and maybe even black if you feel like I'm speaking to you, I don't know, it's your business. If there's anyone in this room who's interested in genuine allyship, then it starts with being uncomfortable, because genuine allyship starts with understanding an experience that you're not living. So how many people knew that that was this young man's experience before he said it? Would you only know that that is black people's experience in this country because he had the heart to stand up and say it in front of a room full of people? And if you're interested in genuine allyship, ask yourself, am I only thinking of these experiences when people of color take the time to explain it to me? Or am I willing to go and do the research? And then when people of color tell me that that is their experience, am I listening? Am I really listening? And then to ask yourself, if I am that couple in the park, hey, I heard that young man speak that night. Maybe it's my turn to smile first. I just think that that's the step to real and genuine allyship, and I just wanted to say that.
Judge Brown, I tell you, give me 5 minutes and I'm going to try to talk her into dropping out of law school and going to seminary.
She has a law for Christ too.
Ooh, you're going to be a great lawyer someday. Yep. So, yeah.
This doesn't need to be the last question, but it's a question that I really want an answer for. Some practical advice for whether it's Donovan or Chuck or any of our student athletes or any man or woman of color, and they are in a situation, wherever they're going, they get pulled over, maybe there was a violation, maybe there wasn't, and things start going bad for them. What kind of advice would you have for them to make sure that wherever they're going, that they will arrive alive, and that we can get it to you, Judge Brown? You know, what do they need to make sure they do, don't do, pay attention for, remember, and I'm saying the situation's getting bad. Maybe they're asked to get out of the vehicle. They don't think they should. Should they stand their ground? What should they do? Gary, Judge Brown, if you guys could just provide some practical advice to protect our kids.
It's a great question. You know, at the same time, Coach, it appeared to me that Mr. Floyd he did everything he was supposed to do. I mean, so that's not a guarantee yet, right? But how would y'all answer that?
Coach, I've been struggling with this since watching the video at 10:37 the other night. Because I said, when the Lord blesses me with my wife, and we are blessed to have children, I know that my mother taught me to always respect authority. I've seen some parents who will say to their children, and I've seen it in court, F the police. I didn't say the whole word, Pastor. I'm in God's house, but God knows what people say. I wasn't taught like that. I was taught that the police are not perfect because we're men and women, but you respect authority. What would I say to these brothers and sisters, white and black, Hispanic, Chinese? Breathe. Things change just like that. Let's just keep it 100. Things get hot real fast. One of the things I struggled with was I sat there and I said, he's in handcuffs. An officer who appeared to be maybe 200 pounds is on top of him. He's in handcuffs. And I started asking myself, where's the threat? Because what what normal officers are trained to do. Chief, you tell me if I'm wrong. I've been a DA, a defense attorney, now a judge. When an officer places someone in handcuffs, they recognize that their hands are behind their backs and they help the person up. Or they sit the person down and help the person to sit down on the side of the road. It's been hard because I'm sitting there asking myself, what am I going to say to my son? Don't resist. So I say to young people, one, I say to you, if you don't, and see, this is where that social media piece, somebody sits there and you say something and you're trying to say it in love and then they flip it to make it something bad. But I'm just going to be blunt. Yes, Father. If you don't have to be, the majority of crimes, and I can't give you a percentage, are from about 10 o'clock at night to about 5 in the morning. Guess where I'm at from about 10 o'clock at night to 5 in the morning? I'm home. But just because I'm out at between 10 p.m. and 5 in the morning doesn't mean that somebody has the right to do an illegal stop or an illegal search. That's not what I'm saying. I would encourage you young people, choose your friends wisely, roll with the right folks, roll deep with the right people. But if the things start popping off and it starts getting hot, I need you to breathe. Because guess what? The answer is not to sit there and always, and somebody's going to say, well, Judge Brown's weak. No, I just want you to live. I just want you to live. And if something is wrong and that officer has done something wrong, if they violated your constitutional rights, talk to your mother, your father, go talk with an attorney. I want you to live. Do you think I'm going to sit here and say to you, an officer sits there and he says something or she says something disrespectful to disrespect them back? Do you think I'm going to sit here and say to you, if an officer, then you need to go ahead and start beating up the police? No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying to you, the police allow the judicial system, if someone wrongs you, but the issue is a lot of people believe that the judicial system is broken. I believe that the judicial system is not broken, but you got to make sure. You have to make sure that you hold people responsible. But guess what, folks? I want you to make sure that you also follow the law. But guess what? What happens if things go wrong and you are following the law? And that's where I say, breathe. If it's starting to get hot, just stop. Don't make it hotter. Does that make sense? If the tub is full of hot water, do you go immediately in the hot water or do you let the water cool off a little bit? I'm saying if you're in a hostile situation, allow the water to cool off. Don't make things even worse. Nobody has the right to harm you. You don't have the right to harm someone else.
Can I jump in, Judge? So, Coach, to that question, I am a father, and I have a daughter now is 18, about to go off to college. But I have we have real talks in the sense like this concept of racial socialization. So even before you get into a sticky situation, a hot situation, conditioning your mind to get ready for it because it's going to happen. That's what I tell my daughters. I tell them, listen, you are going to go into this world and you're going to be treated unfairly simply because of the color of your skin. You're going to be treated differently. You're going to be treated less favorably, and you want to experience things. And here are the statistics to show that, even in the judicial system. Larry Brown is my fraternity brother. I love him dearly, but you can look at statistically, there's some disparities in the system. That's just a reality. And some people, all my white friends, say, Randy, you tell your daughters that? I was like, yes, I tell them this. But I also tell them, under no circumstances are you to buy into the belief that you are inferior than anyone else. You have the God-given ability, talents, and strength to be whatever you desire to be. But you must know that you're going to be treated differently because of the color of your skin. And I think it would be the responsible thing for all people of color, all parents of color, to share that cold, hard fact with their children, so that when they get into that situation, they'll be more ready for it to handle. The only one time in my life that I've introduced myself as doctor, put that title in my name, I've done it only once in my life. And that was when being pulled over by a police officer. Now, I don't use the doctor title because sometimes that creates barriers and prevents relationships from occurring, but I'm just Randy Williams. But at this time, I had to say, I am Dr., not just Randy, Randolph Williams Jr. I am a senior staff member at Elon University. I work closely with Dr. Leo Lambert, and I'm just trying to get home to see my wife and my daughters. And that's a real thing. And I could pass this mic around. I could trust and believe I could pass this mic to other black men who have had similar experiences in this room.
I will say, I read something the other day that was interesting about a single black male. In order to make himself feel safe when he's traveling, he puts baby wipes in his car and stuffed animals in his window to make it look like he's a family man, to put the police at ease.
Reality, you have to. Those are coping things. I mean, I think it's good for us to come together, speak, but at some point, we're going to have to face the brutal realities. I want us to remain hopeful. I want us to be optimistic. I've studied resilience. That's my focus of interest, of research interest. And I know that all resilience theories have a sense of hope. You must maintain hope. But while having hope, you got to embrace the brutal realities. Otherwise, you will die of a broken heart or with a knee on your neck.
So, Randy, I'm an old dude, and most of my life's gone. I'm not slowing up right now or quitting or anything, so not retiring or resigning. So you have kids that are teenagers, and kudos to you for having really honest, authentic conversations. Is there any moment when you're having those conversations, or you and your wife are perhaps pondering what you're going to say, when you're looking at that daughter thinking, it's never going to change? And what does that sense of helplessness or even hopelessness, what does that do to you? And anything that you can say to me or us, do you ever, Judge, Gary, do you ever look at and think, it's not going to get better?
There's certainly moments I feel that way. I mean, again, you mentioned 400 years. There have been a lot of smart people, a lot of college-educated people, a lot of degrees, a lot of people as presidents, a lot of people as judges, as chief of polices. And we still in the same situation? Yes, there is a sense of hopelessness in there. But to cope with the brutal realities, we must maintain the sense of optimism as well. I think you just have to have that sense of optimism and hope, but you have to acknowledge there's some brutal realities. Like, are we going to be naive and think that tonight after this event we're going to all fix this? Or are we going to, is everyone in this room under the sound of my voice, will they go out and become an anti-racist? Where you're constantly, daily, you're thinking about issues of race and how they affect people's lives. And I'm not just talking about people of color, because white people need healing as well. It has to be tremendously painful to say that you're in community with people as a white person and you see people are languishing in your community, the place that you claim a community. So there needs to be healing amongst us all, I believe.
So you have to face the reality of the present moment with your children. And that's an interesting kind of tug, isn't it? That we have to face the reality of the moment in which we live, June 2020, but at the same time, think about 15 days from now. and 15 years from now? And can we somewhere find it in us to fix something, so that your daughters may be able someday to have a different conversation with their children?
I hope so.
Yeah.
And Pastor, I believe I choose to be optimistic. Because 100 years ago, I may have not been able to call you my friend. But today I can say that you're my friend. And I believe in my heart that if I needed, because the word tells me, and you know the word, that you feed the hungry. And I believe that if I came to your door and I was hungry, you wouldn't be scared that I was going to hurt you. You wouldn't be scared that I was going to rob you. You would sit there and say, have a seat with me. And you would sup with me. And you would talk with me. So I believe I choose to be optimistic. It may not be your generation. Well, it may not be my generation. It may not be my children's generation. But I believe and I pray that my children's generation is not going to see color. Because we're all going to be together. I choose to believe that. Maybe I'm naive. I believe in God because I choose to believe in God. That's my choice. And I choose to believe that if we continue to work together, that's not some cliche. I mean together, to recognize the systemic racism that exists. See it for what it is. For everybody to be honest that it exists and say, okay, my friends don't use the N-word in front of me. You want to know why they don't use the N-word in front of me? Because I will check that, whether they're black or whether they're white. If I make my white friends, and I have a ton of them, if I make my white friends uncomfortable because they're like, I can't say a certain joke in front of Larry, then guess what? They're not my friends, if they even consider to do that ignorant joke. Because I choose to know my friends, and that's why I say to you young people, know who you roll with. See them for who they are. And guess what? If they feel certain ways, they're not my friends. But I'm optimistic. Because to be otherwise, whew.
So the other day when you were in my office, and we talked about this, in 1967, I was 15 years old. In Lexington, North Carolina, which was where I grew up, small southern redneck kind of town. We desegregated in 67. So, I mean, in April of 68, Dr. King was assassinated in our first year of desegregation. We were fortunate to, I told you about my black football and baseball coach who really was he was a giant of a man and was able to keep things in our high school, Lexington High School, okay. But I said to Gary the other day, because Randy, sometimes I get these awkward feelings. I can still remember some of that stuff, and I looked at him the other day, and we were both crying. And I said, please tell me that it's a little bit better than it was in 67. Can you imagine that I'm saying that? Because what I saw last week, anyway, that's a purely rhetorical question, and if you can come up with the research answer, then me and you are going to be pals forever, I'll tell you. So,
first, I'm sorry. Gary, if you could just answer the question, and I need more for our guys, whether it's Chuck and he's back in Boston, or Donovan and he's back in Atlanta, but could you speak to our guys and our ladies here, men and women, and even our assistant coaches? I've got 4 assistant coaches on our staff that are men of color, and could you just speak to them like they were your son or your brother, and just give them some specific advice, and then also even maybe we could touch on a bystander and what are the right things to do in a situation.
Just briefly, my advice to them and to any of you who are operating a vehicle and you happen to be pulled over, try to be just as compliant as you possibly can. As you possibly can, be compliant with the officer. And let's face it, now we have these wonderful instruments at your disposal called cell phones. They work. And I'm hopeful, and I'm going to use that word hopeful, that it will help in a situation where you may come up against that renegade officer. But that would be my advice. Just really try to be compliant. And even in situations, it always doesn't work that way. Because we saw a compliant young man a couple of weeks ago, or whenever that day was. So I'm just saying, briefly, all of you, try as best you can to understand the verbal commands that the officer is asking of you, and try to respond to those verbal commands, and just look him in the eye and say, what is it that you have stopped me for? Use those cell phones. I certainly plan to use it if I get stopped. And hopefully and prayerfully that it will be a stop that turns out well for you. And that's the best advice that I can give you. Try to be compliant with that officer, whoever that may be, and arrive safely.
In compliance, I'm so glad Pastor Williams said that compliance does not make you weak. Compliance makes you right. If Trooper Williams sat there and said to me, sir, license and registration, what did I say to you? It doesn't make me weak to ask for permission because I don't want to make a sudden move. We've all seen what a sudden move can do. Compliance doesn't make you weak.
So let me, if I may, also, I just want to give you, this is just information. Anytime you're involved in an encounter with a police officer, and you've heard the advice you get, and you feel that there was improper action, you have questions, whatever it may be, I will tell you that in every agency in this county, you can even go online on some of them, but I would ask you to come in, voice your complaint, and it will be reviewed. It will be reviewed. I want to also give us some practical things that are taking place here, so that it will be reviewed. I promise you, every complaint that comes into the Alamance County Sheriff's Office crosses my desk. I'm in the office usually at 6 a.m. and may not get home till later. It doesn't mean it's all about complaints, but what I'm telling you is we are constantly working to hold, to serve in our communities in a positive way while holding ourselves accountable and to follow up. I respectfully call him Dr. Williams down there because he's earned that. He talks about the statistics in our nation. Well, we are mandated to do traffic stop reports. Every time a person is stopped in Alamance County, there's a traffic stop report and there's a record of it and it's accountable. Now, can somebody go rogue and not keep that can happen, but there is that is rare with the way our we try to set how officers work. but there is a record of it. And sometimes, and I've sat with folks, and they felt something was wrong, and we sat down and walked through it. Maybe it's reviewing camera footage, talking about it, explaining, and there was nothing wrong, but it was explained, and then there's some form of communication and satisfaction. But there's also going to be those times where it was improper and wrong, and we'll do everything we can to follow up on it. So I don't want to leave anybody thinking that it doesn't matter, nobody cares, those things. Please don't give up on us, is what I'm saying.
Dave? Yeah, I'm going to stand up because I'm sore from sitting. So. First of all, thank you to all you panelists. There's a wealth of talent sitting behind that table, and we appreciate that. And as the athletic director of this department, I want to thank you all for doing this and Coach for putting this together. But I want to take us somewhere where I don't think we've been yet, and I think AP was trying to take us there. And I just want to point out that there's a lot of pain in athletics, and it doesn't matter what color we are. And I can tell you from personal experience of being on all sides of this, we probably know more people by their number than we do by their color. That's the way athletics works. But where I'd like to take us is, this is not, most of the people that have spoken tonight and have shared and shown emotion have been black. I want to point out that this is everybody's heavy lifting. I'm a white male. I have a responsibility, and it's not because I'm a leader. It's because I'm an American, and I'm somebody that lives in this society. And I'd like the panel to reflect a little bit on the uncomfortableness of being a white person dealing with a black problem and trying to figure out how even to talk about it, let alone how to not become that person that potentially the only reason I'm talking to you in the last 48 hours is because you're black. That's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I care about you, the person, and I know that this is affecting your world. But you know what? I grew up in the world. I grew up in athletics. I grew up in multicultural, and I don't think I ever saw it that way. But this stuff makes you reflect on it relative to say, okay, then leaning in, and as AP was saying, what are we going to do? I don't know what the action steps are, but I know that relationships are the most important thing to me, and that's always worked for me. I'm a man of God. I consider myself a Christian, and relationships are important. And it doesn't matter what color somebody is or whether they're male or female, or you pick it. But I'd just like to have the panel, with your wisdom, give a little bit of reflection to our athletic department. And I don't know how many athletes are watching online, but those of us in the room, we're young, but most of us are white. Now, we have a strong black ratio in athletics at Elon, but a lot of us are white. And give us your side of maybe how we can help with this and not make our black friends and our black teammates and the black people that we love feel like it's their responsibility. They'll take care of it, and I don't have to worry about it.
I just want to quickly thank Dave. I appreciate that. Dave and I are in a lot of meetings together. We were in a 2-day retreat earlier this week. But Dave, I would say that you used some language in there that I wanted to, and I got fixated on, and you said it's a black problem. And I think we have to shift that thinking right there. If we think it's a black problem where there are only 13% of Americans are black, it's going to be a long time before this thing gets fixed. But when we shift our mindset and say it's a human problem, a human dignity problem, and we make it personal to ourselves, and speaking as a former athlete, being a part of a team and knowing that people of all races coming together for a single goal because it's personal to us, all my white brothers and sisters, how personal is it to you that your black teammates, your black friends, your black coaches, your black faculty members are languishing? How personal is it to you? Does it hurt you? And if not, I want it to hurt more until it's personal to you. Because it can't be a Latinx problem, it can't be an Asian problem, it can't be an indigenous people problem, it can't be just a black person's problem, it has to be a human problem. Until we get to that to get proximate with the issue, we won't achieve it. And I think we have to keep it in mind that it's not just a black problem or any particular, it's not just a white problem. But we have to think of it as a human problem before we can start addressing it. Otherwise, we're going to be creating a solution for the wrong problem.
And it goes back to being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like your phone call today to ask me how I'm doing. Like that meant the world to me because it gave me an opportunity to process like how I'm feeling. And, you know, Randy asked me how I was feeling, you know, in here. And I'm like, man, to me, that feels like it's a loaded question. You know, how am I feeling? It's a lot. So just starting out with just asking, how are you doing? That's a start. And it may be uncomfortable. People may not want to talk. They may shut you down. I don't know how they're going to respond. But for me, it gave me an opportunity to process because I spent this morning walking at 6:30 this morning crying my eyes out. Like if anybody would have seen me on the side of the road, you would have thought something like what happened to her? Because I was boohoo crying this morning because I woke up this morning feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to deal with this today. And it goes back to just the whole racial trauma of thinking about what I experienced and how I'm feeling. And yes, anybody who knows me, I'm an optimistic person. I'm the person that tries to inspire the whole entire world. That's just how I'm built. But this situation has me in a different place to where I'm trying to be hopeful. I'm trying to find that Charlotte that is the inspiration and I inject you with energy and make you smile. That's who I am. But just starting with how are you doing? How are you feeling is a good start.
I was talking to a very dear friend of mine, and I don't believe he would be upset with me for telling you all this. His name is Barrett Brown. He's the president of the Alamance County NAACP. And he and I were discussing this issue, and he made a brilliant point, Pastor. And it goes directly, sir, where'd you go? It goes directly, sir, to your question. He said that we as a people need to stop. When we say a people, meaning everyone, stop looking at this issue as us versus them. Police officers shouldn't look at defendants as, oh, those are defendants. It's the police versus them. A white person shouldn't look at me as an African-American man and say, us versus them. Because when it becomes a people problem, when it becomes all of our issue and we make it personal, then I believe that's when we're going to effectuate positive change. I sit back and I tell people all the time, check racism. Check it. Check it at the door and stop it and let people know that if your friends sit there and all of a sudden you hear a little side joke, you know it came from somewhere. Check it. I would challenge each one of us not to allow racism to continue to eradicate our lives and be present in our lives for what you can control. I choose not. If I knew someone was a racist, that's why I tell people. I'd rather people tell me, I don't like black people, Larry. Thank you. I don't have to roll with you. That's cool. Let me know how you truly feel. And then I will choose not to give you my space. So I would challenge everyone to say for yourselves, if you see racism, see it for what it is. Don't deny that it doesn't exist. I would say black people need to be honest, white people need to be honest too, so that we can figure out how to fix this thing.
Today I played golf in one of the local golf courses, and I played with this white male. He was about 70 years old, Vietnam vet. And after we finished playing, which we play quite often, he said, I always enjoy playing with you. But these was the words that he said to me. He said, if someone had told me several years ago that I would have been spending my time playing golf with a black preacher, he said, I would have said, you're crazy. What did that mean to me? It meant that he took the time to get to know who I was. It meant that I took the time to get to know him. Paul said in his word, in writing, he said, I'm all things to all people. To the Greek, I became a Greek. To the Jew, I became a Jew. To the weak, why? So that I may win one. So what am I saying? Well, you may not like the blues. If you go into New Orleans, you better know something about B.B. King. It's all right for us to get to know one another and all of these wonderful differences we have, because out of that can span relationships. Because in 1960, it was Dr. King and people of color marching through Birmingham and Selma and Memphis. This past week, you saw a different march with different people, all different colors and faces, because all of us want something different now than what we once had.
So maybe one last question. So here we go. Yes, sir. Come on up. 2 last questions, because I'm going to ask these people some one, two. So, how you doing, young man?
What's going on, everybody? My name is Cole Coleman, and I play for the football team. I'm going into my junior season. And I kind of want to speak right quick about silence, and not the silence that we're hearing a lot on Twitter about white silence, which is a prevalent problem, I think, but the kind of censorship, the self-censorship that athletes a lot of times feel pressured so that we do not come off wrong to somebody who's in a place of authority over us, right? And the main example that you can think of is Colin Kaepernick's situation, where he was, obviously we know how the NFL handled that, and it's no secret that the NFL does not take kindly to when people step out of line and they don't follow, the status quo, right? So, I kind of say this to say that sometimes we as athletes feel like we have to self-censor ourselves in order for our goals. And one example of this is kind of what high school students do, to where coaches don't like to see certain things on Twitter, so we make sure that we tone it down and be presentable, have a good image, right? But another example, I think, speaking of the NFL, is, you know how they do not like when people step out of line. I think that, for guys like myself that have higher ambitions and higher goals and aspirations beyond the college level, we feel like we have to censor ourselves in order to achieve our goals, in order to not diminish our chances, which are already statistically slim, of getting to that next level, right? And one thing that I've realized recently with all the craziness that's been happening is it's not just about me, and it's not just about Don or Chuck or JB or Tay or Coach Anderson. It's not even just about the 5 younger siblings that I have that look up to me, and it's not just about black people. This is an American and now even more so, it's a worldwide problem. And I just want to take the time to kind of encourage my fellow student athletes and anybody that has a voice at all to really stand up and use that voice for whatever they believe is right, because at the end of the day, if you sell yourself for your ambitions and your goals, they already say it's a lonely place at the top. Just imagine how lonely it would be if in the process you leave yourself behind.
Cole was talking, but, you know, there was a pretty well-known person once who said that the content of a person's character is a big deal. You know, that we sometimes around here, Judge, we sometimes refer to it, and you know our church, but we sometimes refer to it as a moral compass. And that the content of what's in here oftentimes steers the ship. It helps determine our decisions. It helps determine where we put our boundaries, where the margins of our life are, how we deal with grief and brokenness and heartache, when a relationship breaks down for whatever reason. It's what's in here that ultimately forms the way we're going to embrace that and walk through it. So one last question, and then I guess we'll figure this out, won't we? We'll figure out next steps. So, and you can answer the question too if you want to, but I just assume for you not to, because me and you are buds, and I'm a pastor of a local church. Anybody want to respond to how you see the role of, there's several hundred local churches in Alamance County. Anything that you would say to me and Cliff is an elder in this church, and quite a few of the folks in our church are back there, so they're in this room. Is there a disappointment that you have experienced? Have there been times when we swung and missed? And I'm sure the answer to that is yes, but I mean, are there times when you have been just so massively disappointed that we had an opportunity maybe to do or say something or react to something in a way that could have made a difference, and we just, maybe it was the silence of indifference, Judge, and I'm not inclined to do that, but anybody want to respond to? All right, Coach, you're picking up that microphone, so I can't wait to hear this.
It's pretty simple. Use your voice. You know, and if anybody has watched Pastor Stephen Furtick, who's based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, Elevation Church, go to YouTube and watch Becoming the Bridge. That says it all.
With John Gray?
With John Gray.
Oh, yeah. Well, I can't preach like John Gray or Stephen Furtick, so what is that? What do you want me to do?
Be a voice. Be a voice. You know, when I see white people step up, and you can do it any way that you want to, but when I see my friends also, there's this thing where people will tiptoe to my page, and they'll see something where I'm speaking out, they'll click the like button, and then I go back to your page, and it's crickets. Say something. Say something. It's wrong. You know, a lot of people say, well, I don't know what to say. It was wrong. It was murder. We have to be better. We have to do better.
Yes. Okay.
I'll just say it out loud. Can y'all hear me? So, we all know that what's the most segregated day of the week? The most segregated, the most segregated day of the week is Sunday. I encourage pastors to change that. You might see Larry Brown anywhere on any given Sunday. I might be at Sassafras. I might be at St. Mark's. It's no telling where I'm going to be, because I believe God is God wherever we go. I encourage pastors to stop letting Sunday be so segregated. It's uncomfortable when white people go into a black church sometimes. Let's just be real. Sometimes in some kind of churches you might be holy, holy. Black church might be saying, Jesus on the main. But I'm saying to you, be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I go to white churches, and guess what? I'm still me. Because I want to be around people and understand how people feel and what they think. I would encourage white people to go to black churches. Jesus is Jesus. So that's what my challenge to pastors will be. Let the church represent what the church has always represented. And stop waiting for people to come inside of the church to make a difference. Get outside of the church and get into the community and touch people's lives. That's what I challenge. But guess what? Black folks touch white folks' lives. White folks touch black folks' lives so that we all can just be together and work. We can't do this alone. We've tried that. It's failed. It's time for us to come together and not just be about talking about coming together, truly be together.
Scratching our heads about, but we sat and we talked. So thanks for that, and thanks to the university, Dave, your department for making this kind of a global athletics effort. And our guys will be able to tell you and about how many we had. So, oh yeah, you want me to talk into a microphone? You still have people watching online? Good gracious, boy, that's pretty strong. But anyway, it was, for me, this was, it's always helpful when I talk. You know, when you and I spent our time together this week, you know, I was better. Couldn't hardly wait to get home, talk to Susan about it. And so thanks for the talk. Thanks for giving your time. Now, yeah. So, my brother, Gary Williams, is going to pray us out of here. Okay? Now you can, don't you hold back. Okay? Because, you know, you and I believe in this. We believe in prayer. And so we just need, you know, you and I were able to talk the other day a good bit about, you know, and I told you that I could not contact you. It was an irresistible thing that I had to do. I knew I had to do it, and, you know, and you said it was a Spirit of God thing. I think you were probably right. But anyway, would you pray us out of here, and then we commit, make sure you tell God that we commit to that 400 is enough. Okay?
Let us pray. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who has brought us thus far on the way, thou who has by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in thy path. We pray. Great God, from whom all blessings flow. The words of that song are so true, because even in the most difficult times, you're still God. Even in this time of peril, in this time of pain, in this time of uncertainty, you're still God. A God who changes not. We lift our voices now, God, as one voice of people who are hurting, people who have been looked over, people who have been disregarded, who have been cast aside, who have been ignored. But God, it was you who sits high and looks low. and have found an opportunity in this community known as Burlington for hearts and minds who want to change. We beckon you now, God, to do what you do so well, that you would infiltrate the hearts of man and cause a reaction. A pandemic that we are upon where it prohibits us from reaching out and touching one another. But God, we ask for a touch from you, a special and divine touch of healing, a special and divine touch of righteousness, and a special and divine touch of getting to know one another. You see, because when we get to know you, we can get to know one another. When we know how you had compassion, and I remember the words of that terminology, compassion, it means from within one's bowels. Bowels of mercy. Now we ask you that you would let loose for all of these athletes and for all of these law enforcement officers and for all of the clergy and for judges and for anyone under the sound of my voice listening on this evening. God, we need you. The prayer that was submitted, God, in your word, if my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray, seek my face, turn from that which is wicked, said, then will we hear from heaven. Then will we heal the land. Yes, God, 400 years is long enough. So now, God, would you put soldiers around, God, to march in rhythmic syncopation, onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war with the cross of Jesus going on before. We thank you for going before us now. And we expect a movement, God, that cannot be detained. We thank you for Pastor Bob Disher, St. Mark's Church, for them opening this door tonight of opportunity. May these doors never close, but may they always swing on hinges of hope and on hinges of help. And now, God, as we leave this place, may what we've done tonight, may it not be a distant memory, but may it be orders to arms to do what thus saith the Lord. In the name of Almighty God, we ask and we receive. May the redeemed of God say amen, amen, and amen.
Thank you. Appreciate it.